Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches, the program that takes you around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Layo Olarinde. On the program this week, the conflict in the Middle East continues as people caught in the crossfire count their losses. The war in Sudan also brings displacement and starvation, resulting in the deaths of children. Plus, free medical services in South Africa for the Nigerian and host communities. Residents in southern Lebanon caught in the crossfire of Israeli airstrikes are picking up the pieces of their lives in the aftermath of intense bombings and airstrikes. Meanwhile, those in Gaza continue to flee for their lives.
Israel began a large-scale onslaught on Hezbollah last month. Continued cross-border tensions culminated in Hezbollah missile attacks on northern Israel in support of the Palestinian group Hamas, after it staged a bloody killing spree in Israel from Gaza just over a year ago. U.S. Special Envoy Amos Hochstein visited Lebanon, held talks with Lebanese officials in a new U.S. mediation push to bring peace to the Middle East after Israel killed Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar last week.
As President Biden said, our goal is a comprehensive agreement that implements UN Security Council Resolution 1701 and ensures this conflict is the last for many generations. 1701 was successful at ending the war in 2006, but we must be honest that no one did anything to implement it. The lack of implementation over those years contributed to the conflict that we are in today. Because both sides simply committing to 1701 is just not enough. So I'm back here in Beirut today for discussions with the government of Lebanon, the Lebanese armed forces, other political leaders, and frankly, anyone else who is willing, able to play a critical role in setting Lebanon on a new course of strength, security, and stability, and ultimately economic prosperity.
Israel carried out airstrikes across the country, targeting branches of Al-Qad al-Hassan, a U.S.-sanctioned financial association linked to Hezbollah. The ground outside the branch in the coastal city of Tyre, southern Lebanon, is strewn with rubble, shattered glass, and scattered papers. The 9-story building, primarily residential, housed a few businesses, including a tourist agency, a hair salon, and a wedding dress shop. Hassan Ramlawi was sitting in a nearby cafe when the evacuation order was issued. He called his family and told them to stay home and drove away in his car to protect it from the strike, then stood around the corner waiting for the explosion. He said he heard drones buzzing overhead at around midnight, flying very low about an hour later. For this local resident of the town of Zarani in southern Lebanon, the Israeli airstrikes destroyed his store and therefore his livelihood.
Our stories are here. Our store and our livelihood are gone. This neighborhood is all civilian, with nothing here there. They hit it last night. Our store is right there, and everything is gone.
Israel attacked sites in Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the Bekaa Valley that it said are used by Hezbollah to finance its operations. Hundreds of families fled homes near the targeted locations ahead of the strikes, with no casualties reported. Founded in 1983, Al-Qad al-Hassan, ACA, describes itself as a charitable organization which provides loans to people according to Islamic principles that forbid interest. It has more than 30 branches, most of them located in predominantly Shiite Muslim areas of Beirut, southern Lebanon, and the Bekaa Valley. It operates under a license granted by the Lebanese government. Amid the escalating hostilities between Israel and the Lebanese Hezbollah group, Senegal repatriated 117 of its citizens from Lebanon. Emotional scenes unfolded at Dakar airport as families welcomed returnees. Among them, a father who had brought his injured daughter home for medical care and described losing his son in a recent explosion in southern Lebanon. Senegal, with its significant Lebanese diaspora community, has historical ties to both Lebanon and Palestine.
As you know, we have quite a number of Senegalese in Lebanon. Lebanon has a very historical, long ties with Senegal. We have a large population of Senegalese. Some of them are have Senegalese single nationality. Others are Senegalese and Lebanese nationality. And we said that, given the situation of really hostilities, bombardments, a lot of displaced people, the government had the responsibility to act.
The repatriation followed the protest in Dakar earlier, where demonstrators, including many from the city's Lebanese community, called for a ceasefire across the Middle East. Meanwhile, it's widespread damage and destruction in Gaza's Beit Lahia following Israeli strikes. Flattened buildings and debris are seen in a neighborhood in Beit Lahia following Israeli airstrikes that hit the northern Gazan town. Palestinian casualties, mainly from Beit Lahia town in northern Gaza, were rushed to Kamal Adwan Hospital in Jabalia, following the airstrikes that hit several houses and a multi-story residential building. The Hamas media office said at least 73 people had been killed in the strike, but the Israeli military said it was looking into the incident, but said the numbers issued by the Hamas media office were exaggerated. However, Palestinians continue to flee with their belongings in Gaza's Beit Lahia, as Israel's military operation in the northern Gaza Strip continues.
In Africa here, the war in Sudan keeps on taking its toll on citizens and young children who are dying of malnutrition at the Agiri displacement camp. Our next report is a sad tale of a heartbroken mother who lost her child to malnutrition as Sudan's war brings displacement and starvation.
At midnight in early April, Zaytona Yakub, a 37-year-old mother of 4, woke up when her sick child, 7-year-old Zaki Al-Badri, asked for food and water. When she offered him a bite, he couldn't swallow. Minutes later, he took his last breath as his body stiffened.
I carried him and ran to my neighbor. She told me, "Your son is gone."
Tears ran down Yakub's face when remembering her son, who moved from the good life in the capital, Khartoum, in May 2023, where his breakfast was made up of grilled eggs and milk, to a displaced camp with no food but flour mixed with water that he couldn't eat for several months until he developed anemia. His skin color changed. His face and body were swollen. His mother took him from one hospital to the other, where doctors advised to carry out a blood transfusion, but the boy refused.
When the doctors asked me to offer him my blood for transfusion, or if I can buy blood bags for him, my son insisted, saying no, that I do not have enough for transfusion, more so that I needed to take care of my children.
Nearly 20 minutes walk from the IDP camp, Yakub collapsed in tears in front of Zaki's grave, carrying his pink trousers, the only thing left of him that she had. Dr. Martin Zakaria, a physician and a native of South Kordofan's Nuba Mountains, is no stranger to death. He visits nearby villages to check on malnourished children.
The main cause of malnutrition here is insufficient food. And that's why the mother and the father of this child are not around. They have gone to Asol so that they can bring food for the child. They have left the mother, the grandmother, with the to take care of the child.
Dr. Zakaria said he is often forced to turn starving kids away from his rural hospital because he has no therapeutic food for treating them.
Before war, there never used to be a lot of cases of adult malnutrition. And after the war, and coupled by bad weather that we've seen in the last 2 years, we see an increased number of adult malnutrition. And this comes towards the end, in the middle of the year, from April or May up to September. That's the period where there is not enough food in the households, and they show up in the hospital when they have no other places to go. But majority of these adults are unable to come to the hospital because of being shy.
More than half the people in this nation of 50 million are suffering from severe hunger. Hundreds are estimated to be dying from starvation and hunger-related diseases each day. But life-saving international aid, cooking oil, salt, grain, lentils and more are unable to reach millions of people who desperately need it. The two warring parties, Sudan's armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, have blamed each other for hold-ups in the delivery of aid.
The Nigerian Doctors Forum in South Africa, in collaboration with Nigerian and South African nurses, organized a medical outreach in Johannesburg, providing free medical services to both Nigerian and South African communities. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Somoza, was there and brings this report.
In an effort to address the pressing healthcare disparities in South Africa, the Nigerian Doctors Forum, in collaboration with Nigerian and South African nurses, recently organized a medical outreach in Johannesburg.
It's an annual program, but apart from the annual program, we still go to different locations. We go to different locations in South Africa here. We go to different provinces. We also engage with different associations in South Africa.
Now in its 12th year, the president of the Nigerian Doctors Forum, South Africa, Dr. Ugu Emeka, says the journey has not been without challenges.
Challenges we have, of course, we are foreigners, we remain foreigners in South Africa, and the issue of foreign nationals vis-a-vis the locals, which we're trying to push so that we integrate ourselves as much we can. In all honesty, we've tried to do this at the Maponya Mall, the biggest mall in Soweto, if not in Johannesburg. We wanted to go there and give free medical services to as many South Africans, as many other nationals that are there, but we are restricted because of laws.
Channels Television spoke to several individuals who received assistance during the outreach.
So this outreach is always very profitable to a lot of both Nigerians and anyone who needs medical attention, because trying to get medication here in South Africa is a bit difficult for some people who can afford, because the economy has been a bit difficult lately.
And coming to the terms in their initiative, I would say is a very good one, because a lot of us here, we all know how expensive to go to private doctors are these days. So this type of initiative is a very good one.
Even locals received medical attention. Their stories highlight the critical need for initiatives like this.
I feel so happy. People here, they were so helpful. I came feeling some pains and I explained to them, and they gave me all the medications for the complaints that I had.
We look forward to seeing more initiatives that promote health equity, not only in South Africa, but on the continent as a whole. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Somoza for Foreign Dispatches.
Australia received an August visitor this October, Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla. It had been uncertain if this trip would go on as planned because of the King's cancer diagnosis. However, it did happen, the first of its kind in 13 years.
It's the first visit in 13 years by a reigning British monarch to Australia. King Charles and Queen Camilla landed in Sydney, Australia on Friday, October 18th, marking their inaugural visit to an overseas realm as sovereigns and the King's first major foreign trip since being diagnosed with cancer.
The royal couple were greeted at the airport by Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, Australia's Governor-General Sam Mostyn, and the Premier of New South Wales State, Chris Minns. The King and Queen are visiting Sydney and Canberra over 6 days before travelling to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. Getting right into the state visit, King Charles and Queen Camilla made their first public appearance since arriving, attending a church service in Sydney on Sunday. The royal couple met with the Archbishop of Sydney, Kanishka Raphael, and children from the church's Sunday school. Inside the church, the King and Queen signed 2 Bibles, including one that belongs to Australia's First Minister and chaplain of the First Fleet of Ships that took convicts from Britain to the penal colony of Australia in 1788. Outside, the royal couple shook hands and chatted with families and cheering fans who lined the streets around the church, the public's first opportunity to meet with the royal couple since they arrived in Australia. Still on Sunday, King Charles visited the New South Wales Parliament before meeting officials at Admiralty House. At Parliament, the King presented lawmakers with an hourglass to time their speeches and highlighted the fundamental role of strong parliaments to democracy.
In the spirit of marking the passage of time, it is my great pleasure to present a small gift to the Parliament. It is, in fact, an hourglass, a speech timer, to sit in the chamber and bear witness to the Legislative Council's next chapter. So with the sands of time encouraging brevity, it just remains for me to say what a great joy it is to come to Australia for the first time as sovereign and to renew a love of this country and its people, which I have cherished for so long. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for making me feel so very welcome. Thank you.
Outside, he was greeted by hundreds of members of the public as they gathered to get a glimpse of the King and shake his hand. Later in the afternoon, he travelled across the Sydney Harbour Bridge to Admiralty House, where he met Australia's Governor-General Sam Mostyn and the Governor of New South Wales, Margaret Beazley. From Sydney to Canberra, the next day King Charles and Queen Camilla flew to Australia's capital Canberra, where crowds gathered for their first visit to the city in almost a decade. The royal couple visited the Australian War Memorial and placed a floral tribute at the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. They also greeted members of the public before visiting the For Our Country Memorial, which commemorates the military service of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. At the Parliament House in Canberra, the royal couple received a ceremonial welcome, with the King inspecting the Royal Guard of Honour, receiving a 21-gun salute, and signed both the visitors' books in the marble foyer. Quite unexpectedly, after finishing a speech at the country's Parliament House, King Charles was heckled by an Australian senator. Indigenous Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe strode up the aisle shouting that she did not accept his sovereignty. Security then stopped her approaching the King and escorted her out of the chamber.
Thorpe, who has made headlines in the past for being an outspoken indigenous rights activist, was one of roughly 20 people protesting the King's visit outside the War Memorial earlier in the day. Away from Parliament, King Charles and Queen Camilla visited the Australian National Botanic Gardens, where they planted a tree to commemorate their visit and met with volunteers and staff. While at the gardens, the British royals spoke to Indigenous elders, learning about the significance of Banksia species and how bushfires affect local ecosystems. The royal couple then strolls through the Rainforest Gully and meeting with Australian businessman Andrew Twiggy Forrest. King Charles also visited a skin cancer research centre in Sydney, where he met cancer survivors and researchers working on cures for the disease. The visit to the Melanoma Institute, Australia, is one of the final public appearances he made while on his 16th visit to the country. It's his first major overseas trip since being diagnosed with an unspecified form of cancer, and there was no mention of the King's own diagnosis during the visit. Elsewhere, with his wife joining him, King Charles and Queen Camilla took a turn grilling sausages at a community barbecue event in Western Sydney. The community gathering was designed to showcase Australia's cultural diversity and the country's regional produce. Attendance at the barbecue was invite only and included athletes, entertainment stars and volunteers.
I am so delighted to be here in Parramatta, an excellent choice for a community barbecue, since Parramatta was a place where First Nations people from around the region also came together for generations to meet and trade food. So it's a particular delight to see and smell all the top tucker here today from Western Sydney's vibrant and diverse community.
Earlier, the King visited a social housing project designed with the support of the King's Trust Australia charity. He toured the construction site with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, who grew up on a public housing estate, and met Indigenous actor Wes Patton, one of 3 apprentice construction workers on the projects. And it's more greetings from eager royal fans waiting to see the King and Queen. Thousands of Australians lined up for hours to greet Britain's monarchs at the Sydney Opera House on Tuesday. The royal couple walked through the crowd to stop to talk to well-wishers before stopping to watch a dance performance by school children.
Follow your dreams!
The King and Queen then boarded a boat to conduct a fleet review in Sydney's harbour. While out on the water, the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force conducted flypasts, and over 600 officers conducted a chairship salute. On arrival to Australia, the sails of the iconic Sydney Opera House were illuminated with a photographic tribute to welcome King Charles and Queen Camilla.
And that's the program today. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can always catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde. Bye for now.